That ancient piano has got to go, Mom, my daughter-in-law announced, measuring my living room for her new sectional sofa. Little did she know that my ancient piano was a rare 1890s Steinway Grand that collectors would kill for. The afternoon started innocently enough. I was in my kitchen in Wichita, brewing tea and listening to the gentle hum of my neighborhood settling into another peaceful Thursday, when I heard the front door open without so much as a knock. My son Marcus walked in with his wife Rebecca, and she was carrying what looked like a contractor's measuring tape and a notebook full of sketches. "Hi, Mom," Marcus said, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. "Rebecca wanted to come by and take some measurements for the living room makeover we talked about." I paused, my teacup halfway to my lips. The makeover we talked about? Rebecca was already in the living room, her high heels clicking against the hardwood floors that my late husband George and I had refinished ourselves 20 years ago. She was unrolling the measuring tape with the efficiency of someone who'd already made up her mind about what needed to change. "Margaret, this space has so much potential," she called out, her voice echoing from the front room. "But it's being completely wasted with all this old furniture." I set down my tea and made my way to the living room, where Rebecca was standing in front of my piano, the beautiful 1890 Steinway Model M Grand that had been my grandmother's, then my mother's, then mine. She was measuring the distance between the piano and the window, jotting down numbers with the intensity of someone solving a mathematical equation. "What exactly are you measuring for?" I asked quietly. Rebecca looked up from her notebook, her eyes bright with excitement. "Marcus and I have been talking about how much more functional this room could be. Look at all this wasted space." She gestured toward the piano with her pen. "That ancient piano has got to go, Mom. It's taking up half the room." The words hit me like a physical blow. Ancient piano. As if my grandmother's most treasured possession was nothing more than an inconvenient piece of old furniture. "And once we get rid of it," Rebecca continued, pulling out her phone to show me photos, "we can put in this gorgeous sectional sofa I found. It's modular, so it can seat 8 people comfortably, perfect for when we have family gatherings." Marcus was nodding along, though I caught a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes when he looked at the piano. "Mom, you never play it anymore anyway. When was the last time you actually sat down and played?" What followed was a conversation that felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Rebecca had apparently been planning this makeover for months, complete with furniture catalogs, fabric samples, and a budget that assumed I would simply go along with her vision for my home. "The thing is, Margaret," Rebecca said, settling onto my couch as if she were already the lady of the house, "this living room is stuck in the past. It's all dark wood and heavy furniture that makes the space feel cramped and depressing." She opened a thick binder filled with what looked like interior design magazine clippings. "Look at these modern living spaces. Clean lines, neutral colors, furniture that serves multiple purposes. This is how people live now." Marcus sat down beside her, and I noticed how they'd naturally positioned themselves as a team, facing me like I was the opposition in a negotiation I hadn't agreed to participate in. "The piano especially," Rebecca continued, "it's just not practical. Even if you wanted to play it, the keys are probably out of tune, and it would cost a fortune to have it serviced. It makes more sense to donate it to a school or church where it might actually get used." "Donate it," I repeated, looking at the instrument that had been the centerpiece of my family's musical life for over a century. "Or sell it," Marcus added helpfully. "I bet we could get a few $100s for it, maybe enough to help cover the cost of the new furniture." A few $100s? I stared at my son, the child I'd taught to play chopsticks on those very keys when he was 7 years old, and realized he had no idea what he was looking at. "Plus," Rebecca said, warming to her subject, "without the piano taking up all that space, we could create a proper entertainment center. Flat-screen TV, surround sound, gaming console for when the grandkids visit, much more functional for a modern family." She showed me more pictures from her binder, sterile living rooms with enormous televisions and furniture that looked like it belonged in a hotel lobby rather than a home where 3 generations of women had played lullabies and classical pieces. I know change can be hard, Rebecca said, her tone becoming gentle in the way people use when they think they're being patient with someone who's being unreasonable. But Marcus and I are thinking about your future, Margaret. What happens when you get older and can't maintain a house this size? We want to help you create a space that's easier to live in. Over the next hour, Rebecca and Marcus presented their case with the thoroughness of a business proposal. They'd researched furniture stores, calculated delivery costs, and even found a charity that would pick up donated items for free. The best part, Rebecca said, showing me a catalog page featuring a massive sectional sofa, is that this furniture is designed for real life. Stain-resistant fabric, built-in cup holders, reclining seats. It's practical and comfortable. Marcus pulled out his laptop and showed me photos of other living rooms that had been updated from traditional to modern. Each one looked exactly like the others. Beige walls, gray furniture, and televisions that dominated the space like digital altars. See how much bigger these rooms look, he said, clicking through the photos. When you remove all the heavy, dark furniture and replace it with lighter pieces, it completely opens up the space. And Mom, Rebecca added, think about the entertaining possibilities. Right now, when we come over for holidays, where does everyone sit? There's the couch, your reading chair, and that's about it. With a proper sectional, we could actually accommodate the whole family comfortably. I looked around my living room, seeing it through their eyes for the first time. The piano did take up considerable space. The antique furniture was dark and substantial. The overall effect was probably what they would call dated. But when I looked at the piano, I didn't see an obstacle to modern living. I saw my grandmother's hands moving across those keys, playing the hymns she'd learned in Germany before immigrating to Kansas. I saw my mother practicing scales every morning before breakfast, determined to maintain the musical education her own mother had insisted upon. I saw myself as a young bride, playing the wedding march that George had hummed while he worked in his shop. I understand that you want to help, I said finally, but this piano isn't just furniture to me. It's been in our family for over 100 years. Rebecca's expression shifted to something that was probably meant to be sympathetic, but came across as patronizing. I know it has sentimental value, Margaret, but sometimes we have to make practical decisions. You could take photos of it, keep the memories, but free up the space for something you'll actually use. Photos, I said quietly. Think about it this way, Marcus said, leaning forward earnestly. When was the last time you actually played a song on it? When was the last time anyone in the family played it? The question stung because he was partially right. I hadn't played regularly in years, not since arthritis had made the more complex pieces difficult. But I'd never considered that a reason to give it away. And honestly, Mom, Rebecca added, it's probably not even worth much. These old pianos were mass-produced back then. I've seen similar ones at estate sales for a couple $100s. That comment triggered something that should have been my first warning. Rebecca pulled out her phone and started showing me photos from estate sales and online auctions, pointing out pianos that she claimed were just like mine. See this one, she said, swiping through photos? 1920s upright piano, sold for $300. And this one, a baby grand from the 1930s, went for $500. These old instruments just don't have the market value people think they do. Marcus nodded along, clearly relieved that his wife had done the research to support their position. It's like old china sets or crystal glasses, Mom. They were valuable to previous generations, but modern families just don't use them anymore. Plus, Rebecca continued, even if someone wanted to buy it, the cost of moving a piano is astronomical. Most buyers would expect you to pay for professional movers, which could easily cost more than the piano is worth. She showed me more pictures, this time of moving companies' websites with their piano relocation fees. The numbers were indeed substantial, several $100s just to move an instrument from one house to another. So realistically, Rebecca said, closing our phone with a decisive snap, donation is probably your best option. Take the tax write-off, help out a local school or church, and free up your living space for something that actually enhances your daily life. Marcus was already looking at the sectional sofa catalog again, measuring the piano's footprint with his eyes. This L-shaped configuration would fit perfectly where the piano is now. We could angle it toward the window to take advantage of the natural light. And think about holidays, Rebecca added enthusiastically. Instead of everyone crowding around that little dining table, we could set up a buffet in the kitchen and have people eat comfortably in the living room, much more relaxed and social. I listened to them redesign my life with the casual efficiency of people who'd never stopped to wonder whether their opinion had been requested. They talked about flow and functionality and maximizing space utilization as if my home were a commercial property rather than the place where I'd lived for 43 years. What Rebecca and Marcus didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask about, was the true story of how that piano came to be in my living room. They saw an old instrument taking up space, but they were looking at a piece of family history that was worth far more than they could imagine. My grandmother, Liesel, had brought that piano with her from Germany in 1889. Not the music or the memory of a piano, the actual instrument itself. She'd been the daughter of a master piano craftsman in Hamburg, and when she married my grandfather and decided to immigrate to America, her father had given her the finest instrument he'd ever created. It wasn't just any piano. It was a Steinway Model M Grand, crafted in the Steinway factory in Hamburg by artisans who considered piano making a form of high art. The serial number placed it in a particularly prestigious production run from 1890, when Steinway was at the height of their reputation for creating instruments that were as beautiful as they were musical. Liesel had somehow convinced my grandfather to pay for the piano's passage to America, treating it as essential to their new life as clothing or furniture. She'd understood something that my son and daughter-in-law clearly didn't, that a true Steinway wasn't just an instrument, it was an investment that would appreciate in value for generations. When they settled in Kansas, that piano became the center of their social life. Liesel gave music lessons to supplement my grandfather's income from farming, and her reputation as both a pianist and teacher had helped establish our family's place in the community. My mother had inherited both the piano and my grandmother's musical talent. She'd studied at the Kansas City Conservatory of Music and had been offered a scholarship to continue her education in New York. She'd chosen instead to marry my father and stay in Wichita, but she'd never stopped playing, and she'd made sure that piano remained in perfect condition. I'd grown up with the understanding that the Steinway was our family's most valuable possession, not just sentimentally but financially. My mother had shown me the insurance appraisal she'd had done in 1975. Even then, the piano was valued at $12,000, a fortune for our family at that time. But I'd never shared that information with Marcus. I'd wanted him to appreciate the piano for its music and its history, not its monetary value. Apparently, that had been a mistake. After Rebecca and Marcus left that day, I spent the evening sitting at the piano bench, running my fingers across keys that had been touched by 4 generations of women in my family. Their casual dismissal of the instrument's value had stung, but it had also made me curious about its current worth. The next morning, I called Steinway & Sons directly. The woman who answered was incredibly helpful, and when I gave her the serial number from inside the piano, I could hear her intake of breath. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, "you have an 1890 Hamburg Steinway Model M in your possession?" "Yes," I said, suddenly wondering if I was about to receive bad news about its condition. "And you say it's been in your family since it was new?" "My grandmother brought it from Germany in 1889. There was a long pause. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to connect you with one of our restoration specialists. That instrument, if it's in good condition, is extremely valuable." 20 minutes later, I was speaking with a man named David Chen, who specialized in antique Steinway evaluation. He asked me dozens of questions about the piano's condition, its maintenance history, and any modifications that might have been made over the years. "Based on what you're describing," he said, finally, "and assuming the instrument has been properly maintained, you're looking at a current market value between $160,000 and $200,000. I nearly dropped the phone. "I'm sorry, did you say $160,000? "At minimum," he confirmed. "Hamburg Steinways from that era, especially ones with documented provenance, are among the most sought-after instruments in the world. Collectors pay premium prices for pianos with that kind of history." He explained that the 1890 production run was considered the peak of Steinway's craftsmanship, before mass production techniques had changed their manufacturing process. The fact that it had remained in one family, in one location, for over a century only added to its value. I would strongly recommend having it professionally appraised, David said. But Mrs. Patterson, please understand that what you have is not just a piano, it's a piece of musical history. Armed with this new information, I called Marcus and asked him and Rebecca to come over the following evening. I didn't tell them why, just that I had something important to discuss about their living room proposal. They arrived with renewed enthusiasm, Rebecca carrying fabric samples and Marcus bringing a measuring tape. Clearly, they'd interpreted my call as acceptance of their plan. "Mom, you're going to love what we've picked out," Rebecca said, spreading fabric swatches across my coffee table. "We found the perfect compromise between traditional and modern." "Before we talk about fabric," I said, "I need to share something with you about the piano." Marcus looked up from his measurements. "Mom, we talked about this. I know it has sentimental value, but—" "It has financial value, too," I interrupted, pulling out the folder of information I'd gathered from my conversations with Steinway and Sons. Quite a bit of financial value, actually. I handed them the printed emails and documentation I'd received. Rebecca took them first, her expression shifting from confidence to confusion as she read. "What does this mean?" she asked, looking at the serial number documentation. "It means," I said quietly, "that the ancient piano you want to donate to charity is worth approximately $180,000. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus took the papers from Rebecca, reading them twice before looking up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. $180,000, he said slowly, dollars. "Give or take," I confirmed. "It's an 1890 Hamburg Steinway Model M. Apparently, they're quite rare and highly sought after by collectors." Rebecca was staring at the piano as if it had suddenly transformed into something she'd never seen before. "But it's so old, and the finish is worn in places. How can it possibly be worth that much?" I pulled out another sheet of paper, the explanation David Chen had emailed me about Hamburg Steinways and their significance in piano history. "Because it's not just old, Rebecca, it's historically significant. The craftsmanship from that era can't be replicated today." Marcus was doing calculations in his head. I could see it in his expression. "Mom, that's more than my annual salary." "It's more than your car, your boat, and your down payment on the house combined," I said calmly. Rebecca was still staring at the piano, her face cycling through various emotions. "But you said it was your grandmother's. How did she afford something like this?" "Her father made it for her," I explained. "He was a master craftsman at the Steinway factory in Hamburg. When she immigrated to America, this piano was her inheritance and her dowry." What happened next was perhaps the most educational conversation I'd ever had with my son and daughter-in-law. As the reality of the piano's value sank in, their entire perspective on my home and my possessions began to shift. "Mom," Marcus said quietly, "I had no idea. Why didn't you ever tell me it was so valuable?" "Because I didn't want you to see it as a bank account," I said honestly. "I wanted you to appreciate it for what it meant to our family, not what it was worth in dollars." Rebecca was examining the piano more closely now, running her fingers along the wood grain and peering at the intricate details she'd previously dismissed as old-fashioned ornamentation. "This carving work," she said softly, "it's incredible. Look at how detailed it is." "Hand-carved," I confirmed. "Every piece was made by artisans who considered their work a form of art." Marcus shook his head slowly. "I feel like an idiot. I was ready to sell this for a few $100s. "Or donate it," Rebecca added, her voice small with embarrassment. "Oh God, Margaret, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what I was talking about." "Most people don't," I said gently. "That's why education and research are important before making decisions about things you don't understand." Rebecca sat down on the piano bench, her designer fabric samples forgotten on the coffee table. "Can I ask you something? Do you still play?" "Not as much as I used to," I admitted. "My arthritis makes the more complex pieces difficult, but yes, I still play." Would you play something for us now? I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, seeing them clearly for the first time in years. They weren't trying to take something away from me. They'd simply never understood what they were looking at. I sat down beside Rebecca and placed my fingers on the keys. The touch was still perfect, the sound still rich and resonant after more than a century of music. I played Chopin's Minute Waltz, the piece my grandmother had played most often when I was a child. As the music filled the room, I watched their faces change. They weren't hearing an old piano anymore. They were hearing history, craftsmanship, and the love that had preserved this instrument through 4 generations. When I finished, Rebecca was crying quietly. "It's beautiful," she said. "Not just the music, but the sound quality. It's like nothing I've ever heard." "That's what $180,000 sounds like," Marcus said, but he was smiling now, not calculating. "No," I corrected him. "That's what 4 generations of love and care sounds like. The money is just a number that other people assign to it." Rebecca looked around the living room with new eyes. "What else don't I know about?" she asked. "What other treasures am I looking at that I don't recognize?" It was a fair question, and I spent the next hour telling them about the other pieces in my home that had stories and value beyond their appearance. The hand-painted china from my mother's wedding, the carved wooden chest that my grandfather had made, the quilts that my grandmother had sewn during the long Kansas winters. "I realize now that I've been looking at your home like it was a decorating project," Rebecca said finally. "But it's not a house that needs updating. It's a museum of family history." "It's both," I said. "It's my home, and it's where our family's story lives. The two don't have to be mutually exclusive." Marcus stood up and walked to the piano, placing his hand on the polished wood with a reverence that hadn't been there before. "Mom, would you teach me to play again? I mean, really play, not just the kid songs I remember." "I'd love that," I said, feeling something ease in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. Rebecca gathered up her fabric samples and measuring tape. "Margaret, I owe you a huge apology. I came in here thinking I knew what was best for your home, and I almost convinced you to give away a fortune." "You didn't know," I said simply, "but now you do." As they prepared to leave, Marcus turned back to me. "Mom, are there other things like this that we should know about? Other family pieces that are valuable?" "There are other family pieces that are important," I corrected. "The value isn't what makes them worth keeping." But I also made a mental note to have the house properly appraised and to create a detailed inventory of our family heirlooms. Not because I planned to sell anything, but because knowledge and understanding would help ensure that future generations could make informed decisions about their inheritance. My daughter-in-law had announced that my ancient piano had to go, measuring my living room for her new sectional sofa. What she discovered was that the ancient piano was actually a rare 1890s Steinway grand that collectors would indeed kill for, and that sometimes the things that look old and useless are actually the most valuable treasures you'll ever encounter.